those who don't know me, my name is Steve Peterson, the broker owner of Infinity Investments, which is a boutique commercial real estate firm based in Oakland. We'll be 10 years old next month. So I started this company in November 2009. I've been in the business of commercial real estate investing since 2003. So I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I actually started my career Ohio, a couple deals in Florida. So I've also seen the good, the bad, the ugly in going out of state. And when you're in California, particularly in the Bay Area, a market like we are now, things can get very expensive. So when you're trying to buy in today's market, very difficult to make cash flow. So there's a few reasons why people go out of state, or I say out of state, but also out of area. Out of area is another way to look at things, because we're here in the Bay Area, for instance. A lot of people in the Bay Area will invest out in like the Central Valley, Stockton, or maybe in Bakersfield. Markets like that are still within the state, but outside of their area. So kind of as I go through the presentation, I'm saying out of state, but look at it as also out of your area. And just and kind of look at things through the lens of a California investor. I know we're online, so there may be some people from other states, but California and/or an expensive market. You're in New York, you're in DC, Miami, places like that where rental properties, investment properties are very expensive. So what people begin to do is then to roll their money or take their money out of state. And a few, there's a few reasons that you would go and do that. Particularly here in California, things are very expensive, but it's also the rental laws are very stringent. So I'll be talking about that. I'll also be talking about the cash flow model. I think the biggest attraction to going out of state or out of area is that you have an increased cash flow from what you would get here. So I'll talk about that. I'll break down the cash flow model. That means income, expenses. Ken, we were talking about kind of analyzing the prospectus. So knowing what the income and expenses are, that's basically investing fundamentals. That's the blocking and tackling, that's the rebounding, that's the pitching and catching of investing, the cash flow model. I also talk about some of the challenges, some of the hazards to investing out of state. So I've been there and done that, and I firsthand, especially in the old market, know some of the challenges that you need to look out for. And then I'm also going to talk about some of the keys to success as we go through the presentation. Since we're kind of blasting through it, what I'm going to say is if you got some questions, just kind of hold on to the end. I'll try to get done right around 12:50, 12:55 online. If y'all have a couple questions, we'll see if we can address those at the end of the presentation as well. So hopping right into it, here in California right now, and by the way, most of what I invest in, most of what I broker, so I sell for other people, is going to be multifamily properties. But you can take this, concept and apply it to any type of property: single family homes, triple net, single tenant properties, shopping centers, whatever. But I recommend multifamilies for a variety of reasons. So here in California, right now, the apartment market is truly overheated. Even in the sense of right now, the market's kind of flattening. It's slowing down. I don't know if you guys have noticed that yourself, but it certainly has slowed down from the craziness that we've seen over the last couple of years. All right. Yet and still, capitalization rates, and I'll explain what that is for y'all who don't know, are averaging between 4.5% to 4 to 5%, and even 3.5% to 5% in the major MSAs, in the major cities. So that's the Bay Area, Oakland, San Francisco, San Jose, even Sacramento, LA, San Diego. You're making 3.5 to 4% on your money if you buy one of these buildings. In the Central Valley, Stockton, Modesto, going all the way down like the Bakersfield, you're seeing cap rates in the 5 to 6%, which is really, really low, especially for those areas. So also in our state, price per unit that you buy for a building is typically over $200,000 average right now. So it's very, very overheated. Also, there's barriers to construction, meaning that it's very difficult to build. Now, we've seen a building boom here in Oakland, but the building that the units that we've built is not even going to keep up with the current demand that we have now. And that's any of us who are in and around downtown Oakland. You've seen this mass of buildings being constructed, and however many of them get built, we'll still be behind the demand because it's very difficult to build in California. The cost, the laws, the environment, the political process makes it difficult. So that there's just not enough housing units, and that's why we're always in this crisis. We see a lot of homeless people everywhere. We see a lot of people getting displaced. A big part of that is because we just haven't been able to build enough units. There's other reasons as well, but just from a basic economic standpoint, we don't have enough. We have more people than we have units in general. So that's a challenge. Also, rental laws, very stringent. Now here in Oakland, Berkeley, and San Francisco, if you have a rental property, if you're a landlord, then you really need to be on point with the laws and what's going on in your current city, because they're changing all the time. Understand that they are they are favored towards the tenant. And there's some benefits in that, in the sense of this is a very large state. We don't have enough housing units. Reasoning as to why, the tenants need to have some protections. However, as a landlord, the law doesn't care if you know it or not. It's going to get enforced, especially in Oakland, especially in Berkeley, San Francisco, LA, San Jose. Now what's happened, I don't know if many of you guys are aware, but now, starting in January of 2020, the state legislature has enacted a bill that's going to impose statewide, throughout the state, rent control. Stockton, Modesto, Bakersfield, stuff like that. We already been dealing with rent control in the Bay and in LA, and now in Sacramento. We've been dealing with that for a long time. So we kind of are familiar with it. Yet and still, the laws change on a consistent basis. Let me just say this. I don't want to discourage nobody from investing, because I still believe Oakland and the Bay Area is the best place to invest. But if you're having to buy a property for $300,000 per unit at a 4% cap rate, it's tough to make money, So you just got to start understanding. And if you buy a property where 2 bedrooms, the market rent is $2,000, $2,200, which is what it is, like in East Oakland, higher in other areas. But those tenants you buy in are only paying $800. It's going to be very difficult for you to make income, because you're buying at a high price, but your rents are really low. So these are some of the challenges that we're facing in California now, similar to New York, DC, and other areas where there's just stringent rental laws. Because when you have a high population, that ends up what happened. That's what ends up happening. Especially because you do have landlords who are greedy, who don't pay by the rules, who don't since 2011, 2012. I mean, they've doubled since that period. Not probably, they have. In some areas, they've tripled. So then now, what the legislature does is say, oh, we got to do something about it. The voters is in pain, so we have to do something about it. Now, there's statewide rent control. So, what I'm seeing, is why I'm doing this seminar, what I'm seeing in my business, my clientele, is that people and money are beginning to move out of state. Like when I got into business in 2003 to 2007, out of state investing was the thing to do for a lot of Californians. However, they didn't really get a chance to do what I needed to do, but I needed to get out there and do this walkthrough. And we're looking at some pretty good buildings that are at 60,000 per unit, right? So in other places, it might be a nice area, might be 80 to 100,000, might be 20,000 per unit. So that's a big attraction to a lot of investors. That's why they go out of state. Also, the rental laws are slanted towards the landlord in most states. Okay, not all states, but in most states. So in Texas, in Ohio, if somebody doesn't pay you rent and you have to evict them, you can typically do that in 30 days. Okay, not the case in Oakland, not the case throughout most California. You know what I mean? Now, that's a whole nother, some people try to evict unjustly. In California, we have something called just cause. But even here, if people don't pay rent, you have the right to evict them. However, the process and the cost of that can be extensive. Just to pay somebody to evict. And you don't want to do it on your own. You need to pay a lawyer, pay an attorney. Do not try to do this on your own, please. So in the Bay Area, you may be looking at $1,500 to $2,000. In Texas, it may be $500 to $1,000, and it happens in 30 days versus 60 to 90 days. All right. Now, also, there's much higher cap rates, meaning much higher cash-on-cash return. I'll go into kind of what a cap rate is. That stands for capitalization rate. That measures the income in relationship to the value of a property. So there's out of state or out of area, especially from the Bay Area, there's going to be more income in relationship to the price of the property. That's why really people are excited about going out of the area. Also, sellers are a little bit more flexible. Typically, when you make an offer out of state, you're not offering against 10 or 15 or 20 different people. Okay, even if it's listed, you have a better chance to negotiate a deal. Now, that's in most places. I can tell you right now, in certain markets in Texas, and Houston, and Dallas, it's hot, just like it is here. You know, although the cash flow, the cap rates are still better, but when you're offering, you have to fight out other people. You know what I mean? But in general, there's more negotiating leverage, and sellers are a little bit more flexible. They're willing to carry. Capital gains taxes are lower or non-existent in most other states. In California, you got, who's heard of opportunity zones, qualified opportunity zones? Well, that you do a deal in a qualified opportunity zone, if you made profit, then you don't have to pay federal capital gains. But in California, you still have to pay state capital gains, you know, which anywhere from 9 to 15% or more. So some of the benefits or reasons why people go out of state. But I told y'all, this is the pros and it's the cons, all right? It's managing your property. That's the number one challenge to real estate investing, period, I think. And that gets complicated when you go out of state and or out of area. Why is that? Because you're not able to drive by your property every week. You're not able to check in and drive by the office of your property manager. You're not able to see your contractors doing the work, all right? So this is the number one challenge. And look, all brokers ain't great either, right? But property managers, for whatever reason, there's a much lower, are not good at what they do. And they're particularly not good at managing the cash flow of the property. Because when you're a property manager, you gotta manage the asset, the building, the income expenses, the tenants, the crap that comes around with the tenants, toilets, trash, stuff like that. But you really need to manage the income, the cash flow of the property. And a lot of property managers don't do that well. So you really gotta find good property managers. But also, coordinating with contractors and vendors. Say you need to rehab one of your units, okay? Even if you have your managers doing it, you gotta stay on top of that. That's something that's very, very challenging, okay? Now, another thing to think about is you gotta deal with the perception that you are made of money, all right? When you're in California, or you say New York, or DC, because when I'm doing deals in the Midwest and the South, what's interesting is I always come across other East Coast investors that have the same problems as California investors. And they end up meeting in the Midwest or in the South because it's just very, very expensive. So when you have to do these deals, there's going to be some contractors or vendors that you're going to have to deal with. So that's one of the challenges that us, right? The $60,000 unit might be high to their market, right? So you just have to understand that and deal with that perception going in. Here's another thing that I think is a real serious challenge, especially if you're not just doing a one-time thing. If you're going to do this consistently, finding good deals, right? Because when you're out here and you're investing out there, you're typically just relying on what you see on the internet, right? Which is okay, but it's not going to really get you the inside track of what's going on, right? You really need to get some feet to the street. And even if you're doing it for one time, because you don't want to just get a regular property, you want to get a great deal, all right? And the last thing I think is important to think about as a challenge, you got to fly back and forth to check in your properties. Or even if you got properties, say you got property in Stockton and you're in Oakland, well then you need to drive out to Stockton on a regular basis, all right? Much easier to drive to Stockton though than to fly to Ohio or to fly to Florida or Texas. Especially like me, I was on Sunday, I went to the plane, I was ready, I was supposed to be staying in the Hilton in Kansas City. I ended up staying in Detroit Airport Sunday night. I love Detroit, but the airport wasn't cool, you know what I mean? So that's a challenge. That's something that you have to do, you know? But check it out, man. Some of the bigger investors in real estate, most of the bigger investors in real estate, they invest in multiple markets. That's what they do. They set up their teams, they set up their success. They set up their teams, they set up their systems for success, all right? So I'm gonna break down some of the keys to success that I think that are important, and then I'm gonna go through the cash flow model. And I'm running through this, guys, really quickly. Make sure you sign in because I'm out of the area, okay? First thing, working with brokers to help you identify great deals. If you're on the hunt, if you're identified, go on LoopNet or CoStar. Don't go to Redfin or Zillow. Go to LoopNet, right? Or CoStar, and see who's got the most. If you get anything that fits this box, please reach out to me. I love to work and do a deal with you. Because that person is prospecting, they're working the streets every day to find deals. And guess what we do as brokers? Every property that we put on the market at one point in time, guess what? It was not on the market. We had to go and find it, negotiate with the seller, and then bring it to market. So those are the people you want to talk to directly to start looking up and finding deals. Also be familiar with what's going on with local foreclosures, bankruptcies, all that type of research that you can do online. But really, I think the key is establishing good broker relationships. Then number two, and probably number one, is establishing great property managers. All right, so you want to interview at least 3 property managers in the area. You want to try to look for somebody who's got the CPM designation, Certified Property Management designation. There's other designations though that are out there. I know RIMBY has a certification. That's a real estate management organization. You just want to see somebody, or it's that company, who's taking the time to educate themselves to be the best of the best. Because you need somebody who is on the best of the best status. You do not want somebody who's just going through the motions. Man, to locate a market, an area that has positive population growth, positive job growth. All right? People and jobs, and people follow jobs, right? So what you don't want to do is go somewhere just where it's cheap and then there's not any economic activity, right? There's got to be there's something driving the rents, driving the tenants, okay? And people follow jobs. Historically, out through the history of the United States, throughout the history of the world, people are going to follow where there's opportunity. The project may be a weekly call with your property manager for about 30 minutes, checking on some of the key indicators. How much rent did we collect? Who didn't pay their rent? Who we got to evict? Okay, what units need to get turned? Okay, what construction projects do we have coming down the pipeline? Have some sort of regular communication with them outside of just you calling, hey, you know what I'm saying, where my money at? Okay? You want your money, but you rent collected. Who's behind? Who needs to get evicted, if anybody? What issues are we having at the property? What units need to get turned? What units need to get rehabbed, okay? What about the landscaping, okay? If we just had a lot of states have extreme weather. We're blessed in California. We got an earthquake every now and then, but we don't have the consistent extreme weather that a lot of states have. So what comes with that is sometimes extreme maintenance and things that you have to deal with that you wouldn't have to typically deal with here. So just some of the things you want to think about in terms of having success. Now, there's a lot of technology out there that can help with this. All right, video conferencing. One thing that one of my associates, he's doing a rehab on a building in Dayton, Ohio. And what he's doing is he has weekly video inspections. He has his property manager, he found a good property manager, inspecting the work of his contractor. And they have weekly updates. And what they do is he goes by with his phone and he videos the progress. And he sends that back and then they talk about it. So that way, it's not like, oh yeah, I got all this stuff done and we're just waiting on this. And then you go over there and it's down, the unit's down to the studs, right? In real time, someone, and he's using his property manager to check the contractor with video, dated and date stamped, to go see what's going on with that unit in real time. So that's just something that somebody's using it to help them to manage things. And the bottom line is if you're gonna do this, you gotta figure out what method, what system, what way is gonna work for you so that you can operate a team in place and you can operate through that system and team. That's how you can be successful. That's what all the major companies do, right, with their businesses. And what we're learning in the new economy is that the individual can operate and actually can beat and outperform big companies if we use systems and technology like they do. Why? Because you're a lot smaller and you're not a lot more nimble than the bigger companies, especially in the real estate. So keep that in mind. So some of the keys to success. Now what I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna go real quick, I'm gonna blast through the cash flow model. And at the end of the cash flow model, you'll see why the power of investing out of state is really important, especially in today's market. All right? So I talked about some of the pros, the cons, the benefits, the reasons of doing it. At the end of the day, though, it's still the blocking and tackling. It's still the key fundamentals, the key indicators, okay? And then what I'm going to talk about is some of these key indicators we look at. First of all, number one is cash flow. All right, appreciation is important, but you cannot bank on that. All right, you can look at the areas and you can increase the rents, but number one thing is cash flow. The number two thing is the net operating income. If you see the term NOI, that means net in the market, right? Things changing up a little bit out there, ain't they? Just a little bit. All right. Anybody who was doing real estate in 2006, 2007, 2008? Nobody? Relos? Okay. Really? You doing? Yeah. Everything was great. It was riding high. And we was all kind of drunk with the wine of success and just easy money. And then it like almost without warning, dropped off a cliff. I don't think we're in that type of situation, but we are in a shift, right? So what's more important, identifies the properties, get your team together, properties are going to start coming at you. The first thing you need to do is evaluate them through the cash flow model. You also want to check sales comps, what's going on with the area job growth like we talked about, but this is the most important. So when you're doing the cash flow model, the first thing we take a top-down approach. We start with the income, the gross income, we look at all expenses, and we get to our net and our cash on cash returns. The first thing we start with is gross operating income. This is all the rents that we bring in on the property. When we do our analysis, we do things on an annual basis, okay? In order to come up with the calculations that we're gonna go over, we gotta look at things from an annual basis, all right? So you start with your gross scheduled rents. This is the amount of rent that would be on your rent roll. The rent roll is the schedule of the tenants who live in the property. How much they pay rent, what their deposit is, when they move in, move out. That gives you an idea of what the gross scheduled rent. The rent roll is gonna tell you what that is per month. What you do, you take that rent roll, annualize it out, times 12. You hear annualize, that means break it up over the year. So if I got 1 month of information, I times it by 12. If I got 3 months of information, I times it by 4. That's what annualize means. Income from other sources, all right? You add that, and now that gets you the effective gross income. So you start with the gross operating income, take away vacancy, add other income, that gets you the effective gross income, what you actually bring in. All right, remember we're looking at it on the end. Don't spend too much time, but look guys, this is the biggest thing that a lot of investors miss. The operating expenses. This is not your mortgage payment. This is what's called the cost of doing business. If you buy a building for cash, you're still gonna have taxes, insurance, management. In a bigger building, you may have on-site management and then you have professional off-site management, all right? Maintenance, utilities, repairs, reserves. Some buildings also have lawn care, pest control, security. These are all the costs of doing business. You're gonna have, what we do is with our effective gross income, or we take away the operating expenses, all right? We subtract from that. That gets us the net operating income. I'm sorry, this says net operating expenses. It should say net operating income, my bad. But the net operating income is the lifeblood of the business, all right? This is what the property is worth because this is the amount of money coming in that you're gonna pay your mortgage with and you should be paying yourself with, okay? If there is no mortgage, this is the amount of money that comes in your pocket. Since you pay your mortgage. You pay your mortgage with your net income. Does that make sense? That's a key thing to understand. A lot of investors miss this, okay? Now, it also is the value of the property, all right? And I'm gonna go quick here because for time's sake, but I wanna try to drill this in because in order to come up with the value of the property, we have to capitalize the net operating income. What that means, we apply the cap rate to the current net operating income in order to come up with the value. What is the cap rate? Cap rate stands for the capitalization rate. And that essentially is the rate of return generated by a real estate investment property based on the annual net operating income that a property generates, okay? Basically, it represents the percentage return you would get from a building if you paid cash and didn't have a mortgage, okay? Reflected at, I said the percentage return. That's why we call it a on cap rate. When I got into business, and I'm pretty good at math, but it took me a year or 2 years to really get my arms around what the cap rate is, all right? But essentially, that's the measurement of the income that the property produces, all right? And here's just the formula of how we get to the cap rate. The cap rate is equal to the net operating income divided by the purchase price and or the value. Okay, just to give you an example, let's say the building generates $100,000 in net operating percent, right? It's easy math. Now, these numbers are inversely related. So if I have two of these numbers, I can always figure out the third. A little bit of algebra, I'm gonna bring the algebra on y'all. But if I have two numbers of those numbers, I can figure out the third. If I have the cap rate in the NOI, I can determine what the purchase price is. If I have the cap rate in the value, then I can get myself to the net operating income. If I have the net operating income in the purchase price, I can get to that cap rate, that income rate to be higher. When you sell, you ideally want that to be lower, meaning that the marketplace, the investors in the market, are willing to take a little bit less of a rate of return. All right, like today, if you would have bought a building in 2011, for say, in Oakland, you could have easily got a 9 or 10% cap rate. I mean, the building was generating 9 to 10% on the value. Today, it's like 4 to 5%. Right? Now, if you're buying, it's tough to buy at 4 to 5%. But if you're selling, you want to sell when it's 4 to 5%, because that means your property cash flow. The cash on cash return is the net cash flow divided by the total cash invested. The net cash flow divided by the total cash invested. That's going to give you the percentage rate of return. That's in real estate, that's our return on investment. The percentage rate of return. Now, the internal rate of return, I won't spend too much time. More institutional. When I say institutional, I mean larger corporations actually look more so at the internal rate of return than they do at the cash flow and the cash on cash. The internal rate of return basically is the total return on the initial investment over a period of time. When I say total return, this is what I mean. In real estate, the main element of yield, the main element of return is cash flow. But that ain't the only way we get paid, or we build equity, we build value, or we build a return system. Every time you make a mortgage payment, most mortgage payments are amortized, meaning you're paying to lower the amount of money that you would have to pay tax on, even based on, not based on what you put on your pocket, but based on, you calculate the depreciation, okay? Then there's, there should be, something that's very difficult to calculate, there should be a growth rate. The property should be growing. Or maybe it's not, maybe it's declining. All of that's gonna be jumbled together, and that's how we create or we evaluate our internal rate of return. Look on, especially the smaller investors, is our cash on cash return. It's just that simple. How much cash are you making on your cash? Would y'all agree that's important?
Yes.
That's the biggest one. These are some other measures, but this one, don't miss this, all right? Now, I'm gonna show you how to evaluate cash on cash return, then I'm gonna talk about return on equity, and then I'm gonna give you an example of why, let's say, especially if you have property in the Bay Area, you sell it and you take it and go out of state, how you really can build wealth. But even if you don't have property in the Bay Area, just an example of how going out of state can really increase your cash flow. So we start with the cash on cash return measure. Like we just said, the formula for it is the annual net cash flow divided by the initial investment. And by the way, this initial investment, that's going to be your down payment. If you pay cash, that's your amount you pay for cash. But also, check this out, it's going to include closing costs. All right, and there's a few agents and brokers in here. $15,000 a year. My cash on cash return is, I take the $15,000 divided by 100, that's 15%. Now you ain't getting that in the Bay Area right now. Your friend's granddaddy passed away, they sell you the property at a discount, or you get some sort of inside track, which by the way still always happens in any market, anywhere. So that's why you gotta keep your eyes and ears open. But in general, you ain't getting 15%. You ain't even getting 10%. Right now in the Bay Area, if you get anywhere between 5% cash on cash return, it's actually very good. If you're getting between 5 and 7% on something you buy today, you are beating the street. You're doing really good, all right? In order to get numbers like this, your return on equity. What I just talked about was return on investment. But now once you have a property, once you have an asset, you're gonna start needing to look at the return on equity what is the equity in that property doing for you? Two different measures, right? Because the way we calculate return on equity is we look at the annual net cash flow, the same measure we just used, the yield, what we're making every year. But we now divide that by the property's net equity. So for 400,000, and this actually happened. I did this year. I sold a fourplex for one of my clients in 2014. He bought that property for $455, right? More than 100,000, right? $455. I just sold it for him this year for $1,005,000.
In the Bay Area?
In Oakland, East Oakland. Property doubled in value in 5 years. Okay, so his 100,000 went way bigger than this 300,000. Just stick with me for example's sake. You put up 100 grand, 2014. The building is worth more now. So the equity you have in the property is 300,000. What equity means? The value minus the debt and any associated fees with the sale. So your property's value minus your loans minus cost of sale, broker's commission, transfer tax. That's your net equity. So you would figure out your return on equity. You would take your annual net cash flow, divide that by the property's net equity. In this example, that's 300,000. 15,000 divided by 300,000. Now, on my 100,000, that 15,000 was represented 15%. Really good number. However, when the growth property, 100,000 grew to 300,000 of equity, now I'm only making 5%. Okay, on my equity. Because as investors, we're always trying to figure out how to accelerate our cash flow, how to put ourselves in a better position. So we start thinking, okay, what can we do? What can we do? Well, here's an example. I'll kind of close out with this and we'll get some questions. This is the power of investing out of state. I've done this for several clients in the past, done it for several clients recently. I'm working with 2 or 3 clients right now that are doing this. They said, let me sell my property in a 1031 exchange. And if you don't know what a 1031 exchange briefly, so when you sell your investment property, not your home, but your investment property, you take the proceeds and you purchase another investment property or business property. If you do so following the time guidelines, which is 45 days from the time you sell, you have to identify. 180 days from the time you sell, you have to close escrow. And if you spend all the cash that you made and reinvest the debt or reallocate the debt, you had a $100,000 loan on the property you sold, you got to at least have, meaning you sell a building, you make $1 million, you're going to pay between $290,000 and $350,000 in taxes if you just cash out. Or you can conduct a 1031 exchange, all right? Using this formula, return on investment versus return on equity. So we knew that we put up 100 grand, it yielded us 15,000. 100 grand of cash grew to $300,000 of equity. The $300,000 of equity yielded us the same 15,000 because we was in a rent control market, we couldn't bump our rent. Now this is a side note. You want to always try to increase your rent. Even in rent control markets, there are ways to increase your rent without having to kick people out, all right? But just all things considered, your 100 grand turned 300,000 equity. Now that's only making you 5%. If you took that 100,000, you took that 300,000, and you purchased a new property. Now because the market's hotter, right? Kind of top of the market, so you're not gonna get the same deal you got in 2014. This is not happening, right? But you went to another market that you identified, it was a good market. So now you took your 300,000, but instead of making 15% on your money, let's say you went, now you find something that generates a 10% cash on cash return. You sold your building, did a 1031 exchange. Now you didn't get 15% like you did 5 years ago because the market's, at a higher place. You only got 10%. But 10% on 300,000 is 30,000 a year. How much were we making in the previous example? 15. So even though we didn't get the same deal we got in 2014, what did we effectively end up doing? And we deferred taxes in the process. All right? Now, if you sell a property, you sell a fourplex in the Bay Area, you're anywhere from 700,000 to $1 million, $1.5 million, whatever. You could probably take that equity, go out of state somewhere and buy 20 to 30 units. all right? And you can most likely, you should, if you're gonna do that, you should double your cash flow. People are doing it every day. We talked about the pros, we talked about the cons, we talked about the keys to success. This is available for everybody. And this is how the rich get richer. And I want us all who are trying to figure it out, because it's not like rocket science. You know what I mean? A lot of hard work, a lot of research. What did we say? Hey, look, there's some real challenges out there. So we got to find the right brokers. We got to find the right managers. We got to find vendors, contractors. We need to get feet to the street. We need to fly out there. I look on Instagram and Facebook. I see somebody, it look like people take vacations every month. You know, people are like, I'm in Indonesia, I'm Hawaii, I'm out here. It was like, oh, you got to go out to Ohio and look at the property. Oh, I ain't doing that. But you know, Indonesia, you're in Bali. But for business, you know what I mean, it might, you might have to roll your sleeves up and get into the trenches with it. But if you can do it, you can make a lot of profit. So let's get into questions. You got some?
So you have to know which state is going to, the properties are going to accelerate, right? You don't know. How can we find out, you know?
Great question.
Yeah.
Great question. So,
Yes, not all states, they go up.
not all states and then not all cities. Give you an example. I was doing business in Ohio. In Ohio, Cleveland and Cincinnati at the time were struggling. But Columbus, Ohio, was actually doing really good. And so there's a couple things you can do to go analyze the market. Okay, you want to go to the U.S. Census Bureau to get an idea of population growth over the last 10 years. This kind of starts with population, because population numbers are going to tell you people move where there's jobs. Okay, within that, when you go to the Census Bureau and you can look at what's going on with population, there's going to be information on employment in there as well. So the two things you want to track: population and employment. Year.
Right.
You want to see what the trends are over the last year, right? And then look at things like time on, not just the price per unit, the cap rate, but the time on market, the availability on market. Then what you want to have your property manager do is a rental survey. And this is probably the big, if you want to check out the job, the population, the sales comps, the area, the schools, everybody can go online and check out the school districts, and not necessarily, you know, and then just try to, you know, when you're out to the property or when you're out to the city, maybe go talk to the Chamber of Commerce, talk to some local businesses. Hey, what's going on in this area? Who's hiring? What new developments are there? Drive around, kind of see, is the city depressed? Is people out here looking like, you know what I mean? Or is there some lively, is it going on? And those are just a couple things that you can do. But the key is jobs, population, rent stability, rent growth. And on that, okay, you can go to IREM, I think IREM, I think it's IREM.org. Or if you just Google the Institute of Real Estate Management, IREM, they're going to get you a lot of facts and figures about the local vacancy rates, the local rent per units, the local cap rates. And that's a great, and they're probably going to have some economic data on the area as well. So if you go to IREM.org or just Google Institute of Real Estate Management, I'm seeing a couple of states that I see some positive growth. Oklahoma, Western region, the Midwest states, Kansas, Colorado. Colorado is a great place to invest, but again, Colorado has a very strong economy, and their prices have come up. But if you can find a good deal in Colorado, Colorado is where you want to be. You know, Kansas, Missouri, now within the other parts of the Midwest, Indiana, Indianapolis, Ohio, Columbus, okay? If you're in Illinois, you need to be in Chicago. But I think the Southeast region and Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri are some of the great. Detroit, okay. Detroit,
I see a lot of companies moving in
has a lot going on in Detroit. And you can buy stuff really, really cheap.
And they got companies going
And they have a lot of tax credits. The government is enticing people to come in there. I think it's just, if you go to Detroit, you need to be prepared to be there for a while. But that's okay, because I just was there in the airport, and you can just see that things have come along in the last 10 years.
What kind of tax enticements you said?
The whole state of Michigan has a bunch of taxes. I haven't looked into that, but they're attracting companies there, and that's what it is. KC is.
Oh, it's Kansas. I'm sorry.
No, but it's all the same there. It's like the Bay. You know what I mean? It's got one Bay area, but we got multiple cities. So you have Kansas City, Kansas, and Kansas City, Missouri, but it's the same metropolitan area. So what I found out there, what I like about there is there's stable rent demand, there's good population growth, and the rents are higher in Kansas City per unit than they are pretty much anywhere else I've seen in the Midwest other than Chicago. So rents are higher there than they are in Columbus, and they are. I think what it is it's kind of it's the Midwest, but it's still really close to the West, which is Colorado and the Western states. You know what I mean? And then Kansas City is just a major city, and there's a lot. So it's kind of centralized. That's what I can see about it. And then they have positive job growth. You know, which again, it's what I was out there trying to figure out, which I didn't figure out. I'm still researching is what is it that's driving the industry. They have a big barbecue industry in Kansas City. You know what I mean? But I'm trying to figure out what's the driver out there right now. Eric?
For a couple of years during the recession, I worked for a asset custodian company. Wells Fargo Advisors is headquartered in Kansas City. So you got a lot of the back office for a lot of these financial services company in Kansas City.
Yeah. And it's a good blend of service jobs, a lot of construction jobs going on, and kind of higher end jobs. So it seems to be a real good fundamental market, in my opinion, that will do well in a bad economy. So that's what I'm seeing out there. But I think also just expenses gonna be a little bit higher.
Why is that?
Because they got intense weather in the summer and they got intense weather in the winter. So your heating bill, your maintenance bill, it's gonna be a little bit more. So most apartments run about 40% expenses of the gross income. In the South and the Midwest, you look at about 50%. That's about what you would expect to pay. In California, it's about 40% of the gross rents.
Well, since you're talking about what you have to pay, do the tenants pay that electricity bill?
Depends.
No.
Depends. So you want a good question. It's not individually metered. The owner pays that, and that's the kiss of death. Especially in Texas, what I noticed, and Texas is tough because again they have some extreme hot and some extreme cold. They have a lot of chiller systems. Like if the building was built in the 70s or the 60s in Texas, they have this chiller air conditioning system. It's like a master air conditioning. So the tenants love it because they don't pay for it. It's not a good look for the landlords because in Texas you got a long summer, it's really hot, and you're gonna have to pay for that. However, you can see who's the listing broker. Because here's what you're looking for: who is the active producers? Active producers gonna have listings. All things considered, you know what I mean? Yeah, you might meet somebody, you might go out there and you might meet somebody at a meeting or whatever and decide to work with them. Maybe they don't have a lot of listings, but they work with buyers. You just want somebody who knows, who has their feet to the street, has a pulse of what's going on, and who knows sellers. Somebody who has 2 or 3 listings, they got those because they're working with multiple sellers and they're prospecting for sellers. So they're gonna be more likely to find a deal.
I don't want to get anything on market.
Yeah.
It's like
And a lot of people don't understand about brokers and agents. And I'm a broker, so I'm biased, of course. But here's the reality of it. Before we list the property and it's on the market, it was off market at some point. And especially in commercial real estate, most brokers will take 2 or 3 weeks before they put a property on the market to circulate it within their database to see if somebody wants to make a move on it.
I'm an investor, so what I do is I look for states where there's no income tax. You guys don't, and also lower property taxes.
Yes, so
There's some states have very high property taxes.
Texas is a state that has no income tax,
Good.
but they hit you with the property
Property
tax.
tax.
It's high.
It's high, it's like
How much?
3%.
Oh. See, yeah. How
So,
about Michigan? Can you tell me how much Michigan is?
Michigan's a lot lower. I don't know exactly, I haven't done a deal.
I have a building, I pay a lot of property tax there for a small amount of the.
In Michigan?
Yeah, and Dearborn.
Because I know Michigan, the state of Michigan was giving every tax credit they could. That's why you asked about Detroit.
I asked about the tax.
Yeah, maybe look into that.
What should I do?
Here's another thing. Everybody even in California, you can always protest your property tax.
Yeah.
There's companies
I
out
should
there.
do that because
You should do that. You should do
because
that.
I bought a property for $70,000 and I'm paying like $3,000 and something.
Oh, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
That's more
what
than
I'm-
3%.
So should
But
I go there?
You should check that because there are a lot of times they just assess what you. They're the government, man, so they do what they do. You know what I mean? But you have the right to protest the taxes. There's companies out there that will do this. I would suggest doing that because you don't want to pay too much.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I'm scared to invest out of state. You don't know what kind of property tax they're gonna.
But you can figure that out. Just Google the county assessor's office, call them up. Like for instance, where we are, Missouri, and I'm doing a deal in Kansas City, Missouri and Kansas, their property tax is very similar, but it's different. So it depends. If you're in Kansas City, it depends on which state you're in. Your property tax is going to be pretty different. But those are all things you can research. That's a big part of you doing this out of state. A big part of the research you got to do. It's just getting this knowledge before you make that move. So by the time you get earthquake insurance on your building, you ain't making no money. So it's like, what's the whole point? You know what I mean? But that is not as expensive if you're trying to get wind or, you know what I mean, or flood insurance. It's not the same. You know what I mean? So look to add on your policy. Everybody's gonna have the basic fire insurance. Wildfire is a little bit different. Wildfire insurance, as we learned out here, is different. So you want to look to add those riders to your insurance to make sure you're good in the event of some crazy weather. Out of state, they got some crazy weather. So
even here, a lot of insurance won't accept flood. They won't take, if you're in a flood zone, they won't give you flood insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. You can get it, but you have to shop around and you gotta work
Not
together.
all insurance companies do that.
Yeah. So look guys, we'll wrap it up. If you want to get the presentation, make sure you sign in. That way we'll email this out. Iman, is there any questions online?
No question online.
Okay, good. So one more.
About college students.
Yeah.
I wanted to buy some property out in Huntsville.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like the rents there are so low.
They're going to be low, but you want to look at the rents in relationship to the price per unit.
Okay.
Because the price that you have to pay per unit, and look at that ratio because it might surprise you. Eric?
I was going to add to that, if you're buying close to a university.
Yes.
Typically, like for example, my background is commercial real estate lending, and I have a client who owns 25 properties in Berkeley, and what he does is you're like right across from campus. So his business model is he only rents to grad students, and he rents them by the room. So for example, if you have a 3-bedroom apartment, if you rent it to a single individual household, let's say that you're only going to get $3,000 a month for it, but he's renting them by the bed. So he's getting $1,500 per room.
Wow.
So he's getting $4,500 versus $3,000. That play only is, I think, feasible when you're in university environments with strong demand, like Berkeley, right? So that's my 2 cents, sort of, if you're looking to buy in a university town, so to speak.
Okay. Oh, thank you so much.
Like, well, if you're in Alabama, then that would be what, Tuscaloosa, and then where's Auburn?
I'm not sure, but it's somewhere close by.
But it's like, for instance, you're in Tuscaloosa, that's a major city. Well, it's a major college town, right? Not a major city, so it might be good, but you got to be careful. Like, for instance, Columbus, Ohio, huge Ohio State there. The area surrounding Ohio State, the rents are insane. The prices are almost like the Bay Area. You drive 10 minutes away from there, though. And you're in the hood, and you're getting $500 for 2 bedrooms, and they got some serious hoods out there. So those are just some of the things. Thank you guys.